It's a great pleasure to be hosting this session here today. Amongst a great company, I will just introduce the speakers very briefly, and then I would like to moderate a discussion after a 5-minute presentation from everybody. I would like to start with Professor Joseph Sifakis. Professor Sifakis is now entering Laureate Award, and I would like to start with his presentation right away. Professor Sifakis, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will use my 5 minutes to discuss some challenges, ethical, social, and legal, posed by emerging ICT technologies. And to start, I will say that we are living, of course, a revolution, and this has a deep impact on our lives. There are opportunities and risks. And more recently, the extensive use of AI in critical autonomous systems, such as autonomous cars, smart grids, smart medical robots, raises important ethical issues that I would like to explain. So far, technical civilization has been propelled by the development of scientific knowledge that allows predictability and explainability. We trust the artifacts we build, such as bridges, aircraft, vaccines, because they are based on scientific methods. We can guarantee through modeling and prediction their trustworthiness. Now, the problem with AI techniques is that they rely on a new computational paradigm that outperforms conventional computing in the solution of some problems. And nonetheless, they produce a new kind of knowledge that allows some kind of prediction, but without explanation. And this is the issue I would like to discuss. Let me say a few words about how in modern societies we manage risks. So for critical services and artifacts, there are independent institutions that guarantee their trustworthiness. For instance, for artifacts like toasters, vaccines, bridges, aircrafts, there are standards that are applied by agencies and that guarantee their security. If you buy a toaster, you are sure that if you use it properly, it will not kill you, or we know that the probability of failure of an aircraft is 10 to the -9 single failures per hour. So everything is very clear. However, for AI techniques and the large computerized systems, there are no standards, there are no rules, and hence we have the dilemma. Either we require conclusive trustworthiness evidence, or we limit technological progress, and this is an issue. Now we are at a turning point because in the US, some state and federal agencies allow what we call self-certification for critical automotive and medical systems. And I would like to explain that there are two approaches for dealing with risk from innovation and the risk in general. Either you apply what we call a precautionary principle, and this means that if there are some threats to humans and to the environment, and there is lack of scientific certainty that this will not appear, then just forbid this. So we don't, some countries do not want to have nuclear weapons or forbid the potentially hazardous pesticides, or although of course they can be very helpful for productivity. And the other approach is to find trade-offs between risk and benefit by applying macroeconomic or microeconomic techniques. Okay, so the question is, these two approaches are very different, and which we take. This is an important question. Now, regarding ethical issues, I would like to say that ethics is about making decisions, so between choices. So first of all, you should be aware that there are choices, and I fear that for ICT-driven technologies, people are not even aware that there are choices because they consider that they are a goal in themselves. And also public authorities are very permissive. They leave the game open, or they are indifferent to misuse of ICT. So first of all, public should be aware that there are choices. And once they are aware that there are choices, they should also be informed to judge rightfully. And concerning ICT technology, I think that there are two conflicting positions. Some people say that AI, for instance, is a fatal threat to humanity. You have people like Elon Musk or Bill Gates that say this, and others push to the acceptance and adoption of new technologies. And I think these two extreme positions do not allow, do not provide the conditions for a calm, informed, and reasoned debate. Now, to close, I would like to discuss three important ethical issues. One is freedom of expression versus safety and security. How to preserve fundamental freedoms while protecting against harmful behavior. That's very important to prevent abusive use of ICT, so to avoid big brother society. You probably know that in some countries now they use this social credit system or reputation systems that are point systems that give points, evaluate your behavior, and these are based on AI. The other issue is freedom of choice versus performance. So in some cases, of course, AI systems allow performance, but the question is whether they decide based in an unbiased or in a neutral manner about people. So the rule, in my opinion, should be that the performance benefit should be commensurate with the risk implied by the lack of human control. And I will finish with a third ethical issue that is very important, is to find the right balance between mind, between human and computer, a right division of work. It's clear that innovation, technical progress implies some loss of skills. Primitive people have been using machinery to multiply their muscular strength. So naturally, humans lost some of their capabilities, physical capabilities, but losing muscular strength is not as dramatic as losing our ability to develop knowledge and judge responsibly. And this is in the essence of human nature. So I think that if there is a risk from AI and ICT technology, it's not that computers become more intelligent than people. By no means. This will never happen. And it's obvious to me. But the risk is that people inclined to intellectual laziness and comfort let computers decide on behalf of them and make decisions they don't understand. And this is, of course, a scenario that can be too bad for humanity. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor. I have that was a very stimulating introduction. Before we move on, you already mentioned some recommendation systems and some social reward systems. And I wanted to connect that with the current COVID era, where we see that lots of people in several countries, we are under some sort of a lockdown, and several countries have some sort of a track and trace system, electronic registries. How do the systems help us with COVID, and what might be the problems facing the systems? Are we losing some of our freedom just in order to protect us and contain this pandemic? Or did the systems actually gave us rewards in what they promise? Can I have a first thought of that, please?
Yes, so in some countries, they have used systems for, various kinds of systems. I know the Chinese case that has been very successful. So in China, you have to provide, you are monitored, you have an application on your mobile phone. But I told also about reputation systems, and reputation system is something different because reputation systems are AI systems that evaluate your behavior in general. So it's not for COVID, it's in general. And in China, they are trying to use reputation systems, but some companies also develop reputation systems just to evaluate the behavior. So, and these systems are based on AI.
Thank you. Thank you for this first comment. Let me move on with the second presentation, and we'll be back to all of these interesting ideas. Professor Stamatios Krimigis, if you would like to go ahead with the presentation, please.
Thank you very much. I do want to show a slide and screen share, and I hope it shows up. Now, I have concentrated my remarks on, I guess, you've shown all my points. What I'm saying is that in our field, which is space research and space exploration, the pandemic has had a very limited impact because quickly the whole field has adapted to doing work remotely, and only the minimum staff of people were in the laboratory who were finishing up and testing the spacecraft. So it's possible to use the remote and in situ activities to continue the design and build of spacecraft. The next bullet, if you can show that, the latest example that everybody knows about is NASA's Perseverance lander on Mars. And that essentially got prepared during the pandemic, the last part of it anyway, and it was a successful program, and the institutions adapted to how to do that. The next one, which relates to the picture that I have on the right-hand side, is a program called DART, Double Asteroid Redirection Test, which we're doing at Johns Hopkins, and it will launch later this year. And the intent is to intercept a Didymos, one of the a near-Earth asteroid that will be passing by a few million kilometers from Earth, and then try to impact it with enough energy so as to alter slightly its course. And this is one of the basic principles of space defense these days, that what can we do if there is an asteroid that's coming towards Earth and there is going to be a collision? And this particular program is to demonstrate that you can actually do a lot, namely to change its orbit by only a couple of millimeters per second, and then it will miss. So the next bullet, if I can see that, it talks about all of this work about these programs that I just highlighted has been accomplished on schedule without significant disruption, and that model can be continued in principle. But there are some, next bullet please, there's a downside to it. It inhibits, among other things, the direct transfer of knowledge between mentors and mentee. How do we transfer knowledge to the younger generation of scientists and engineers so that they can take over and continue to do the kind of work that has been at the state of the art for the past 50 years? Well, so the problem is that we're all social animals, and trying to mentor somebody from a distance via platforms and Zoom is really not the same as direct transfer of knowledge between leaders and students, and scientists and students, and engineers and students, because That's the methodology that we have used, obviously to good effect. And now, as we're getting out of the era of, hopefully, of COVID, the question is, are we going to try to continue to work remotely, and is that going to be good or bad? In the methodology, in other words, that we have all known that has worked and has given results, is probably going to be changed by a lot of remote work. And who knows whether all of this model is actually going to work well. And finally, just on the comment on the overall theme of the discussion about ethical issues vis-a-vis technology, I have to say in our work in the space program over many, many years, we didn't quite have any ethical issues, because who is against exploration? The only potential ethical issue that could come up will be maybe in the next 10 to 20 years, if, for example, there is discovered biological activity on planet Mars, which undoubtedly is being searched of as we speak, and maybe samples will come back to Earth. And we're going to have to say, well, should we or should we not share that with the world? For me, that's a no-brainer. Of course we should. Of course we must. As we all know, of course, that may be offensive to a number of religion dogmas that circulate in the world today. So with that, I thank you very much for asking me to speak.
Thank you, Professor Krimigis. I have been asked not to ask a question, but I will overrule this. In the interest of time, I will just ask you very briefly so we can move on fast. How do you see, you have been working for NASA doing excellent and very pioneering work. How do you see private companies going into this type of exploration, space exploration, and what kind of dangers might that inhibit for the rest of the people? What do we pass on? What types of rights? And where is the ethical line that we have to safeguard when private companies are going into space exploration?
Well, that's a very good question. And we have already seen that there is some activity in that area. Elon Musk wants to colonize, as he says, Mars. I think personally, from a technical standpoint, that's a foolish thing to say, and it's not going to happen in our lifetime. And the presumption or the assumption was that we'll take you there, but we will not guarantee that we'll bring you back. And despite that, so many people really decided to do that. And the ethical issue is, should the government allow an entrepreneur to risk that many human lives, even though the people may be willing? And I think that is the issue that we're going to have to watch out for in the next decade.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Let me move on to Professor Constantinos Daskalakis. I don't know if we have any slides. I don't have any slides to show myself. So I guess, Professor Daskalakis, you will just give a presentation.
So can you see my slides now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thanks very much for asking me to speak and address this interesting conference. So humanity is hopefully getting out of a big shock, and science seems to have delivered a solution to the pandemic. But during the pandemic, we saw a lot of disagreement even within scientists. And I wanted to offer a few remarks regarding another area where there's a lot of activity, and where also, as Professor Sifakis mentioned, there are issues of robustness and trust, and I want to discuss them and offer some thoughts around them. So, as you know, the past decade or so has seen a revolution in the field of machine learning and artificial intelligence. So computers have developed excellent skills in image recognition, voice recognition, and translation, and which are finding slowly applications in real life. Computers have been able to beat human players in very difficult games, and the most recent revolution is happening in text generation. But these breakthroughs, which are admittedly breakthroughs, what do they really mean? Sort of like outside of the headline results that make it to the news, there is an unredacted story, and that unredacted story presents many cases where technology actually is not as robust as we may think. So progress in machine learning has been driven by testing algorithms on benchmark tasks. And it is very common that computers beat human performance in such benchmark tasks, but when you shift to new, different benchmarks, your presumed accuracy drops significantly. So the performance may be robust in a particular data set pertaining to image recognition, but when you move to a similar benchmark task, you may see a huge reduction in performance. So while you might think that your ML, your machine learning models are at human level, they may actually not be at human level. Indeed, when you deploy your technology, you very commonly see it failing, like what we see here on the upper left, where a Tesla car crashes onto a truck that is stopped on the left-hand side of a highway. On the right, the top right, we see a robot failing, and at the bottom we see targeted attacks against image recognition algorithms, wherein we can change the orientation of images to get a state-of-the-art image recognition software to give a wrong prediction. So, like you see here on the bottom left. On the right, I'm showing you a video of a turtle that was 3D printed by some MIT students who painted the shell of the turtle in such a way that state-of-the-art image recognition software recognizes the turtle as a rifle. Of course, you can imagine the safety issues that may arise when such algorithm is used in life-critical safety applications. It has also been documented that algorithms are biased. They incorporate bias that is in their data, and they replicate this bias. And there are many examples of that. An important one raises several ethical considerations was pointed out in this important article in ProPublica several years ago now, who tested an algorithm used by law enforcement, and in particular to decide whether to pre-detain a suspect for some crime. That software has been found very biased against certain subpopulations. Finally, while algorithms have admittedly come to beat human players in very complex games like Go and two-player Texas Hold'em. On the other hand, as you see in the video on the right-hand side, they can actually be exploited by humans. So what you see on the right-hand side is a Waymo car, a self-driving car, that is trying to enter a highway, but it's being antagonized by human drivers, so much so that it abandons the attempt and exits the highway and tries again. Which raises the question, how is it that machine learning models beat humans in very complex games that very few of us can play well, but they cannot play other real life games, such as entering a highway, which many of us can play reasonably well. So real AI is not here yet, and there are many reasons for that. There's an important issue of robustness. So algorithms are not robust to biased, incomplete, and shifting data. Data that have dependency structures in them, like data collected in social. As Professor Sifakis very well said, AI research has focused on prediction. And prediction is not science. Science is understanding. And to understand, you have to understand causal mechanisms that are driving the phenomena that you are studying, and developing the ability to make counterfactual predictions, to make what-if types of predictions. I agree with Professor Sifakis that we have to think about the competition and cooperation between humans and machines, as well as different agents, different machines. And I do not agree with a dichotomy. I agree with Professor Sifakis, and I disagree with a dichotomy that is often presented in news articles between humans and machines. I don't think there is an issue that such a risk that machines are going to come against us. But I think of the future more as a complementarity between humans and machines, without that meaning that we shouldn't pay attention on the several bias, privacy, ethical, and societal impacts of the technology, like any other technology. It's finally, and I will close with that, it's very important, since there is an ongoing revolution, it's very important that we all have access to the technical advances, the data, and the computational power that is necessary to make progress on this technical front, and to participate in the ongoing revolution with the obvious applications in markets, society, and the public sector, and many other applications. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Daskalakis. Very briefly, one short question. I enjoyed all of the issues that you touched upon. I wanted to talk a little bit about AI bias. Only last year, we have seen in the United Kingdom, GCSE exams were scaled up or scaled down by an AI algorithm, and that really revealed and uncovered the bias that we have in social economic preferences within the UK. So there was a lot of uproar from students that their marks were scaled down, depending on whether they were coming from poorer schools, and privileged students, their marks have been scaled up. So when that situation arises, an AI algorithm really reveals a bias, a human bias. What shall we do next? Do we have to learn from that, or do we have to teach the AI algorithm to identify the bias and move beyond it?
Yeah, and this is a very important issue, and it raises another important issue, and that has to do with the fact that so there are two issues with AI bias. So one is a bias that is in the data, and so maybe your data is complete, but the data is biased because society is biased, and because society prevents certain observations that could have been realized from being realized. There's another issue with AI bias, and that has to do with incorrect data collection campaigns, which actually fail to collect all relevant data. As you know very well, in life sciences, we are very careful with our experiments. We do randomized controlled trials, and we are very careful about collecting representative data. That doesn't mean that we always succeed, but we make a lot of effort there. Unfortunately, the way the AI field has progressed, as I was saying earlier, it's all around benchmarks. We collect data from wherever we can find data, from the internet, from from wherever we can get our hands on data, and we use that data to develop algorithms. That is very, very problematic, especially in view of the fact that the field commonly seeks for targets making predictions and not making causal discoveries in the data. So all of this together it's hugely important. And if that type of bias cannot be avoided, to answer your question directly, we certainly need to engage scientists who are experts in that type of bias, and those experts could be coming from the domain expertise to at least know where bias will be to try to avoid it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let us move on then to Professor Emmanuel Goffi. Dr. Goffi is able to join us again. We will give him his time to give a presentation. So thank you very much for everybody for your initial thoughts. I wanted also to ask you a little bit. We talked a lot about AI systems, and of course these are on the forefront of new discoveries, but I would also like to bring forward other new technologies such as genetics, nanotechnology, and neuroscience, which are emerging as we speak, and they don't have such an impact at the public thought yet, but we are expecting to have a lot of impact into the future. And then we also have problems of democratization. We know that access to genetic medicine and genetic drugs is very restricted, and it's probably going to be restricted for the next few years. I would also like you to comment a little bit on these new technologies, and maybe have some of your thoughts on how can we reveal the secrets of these new developments to the public in order of not just creating a new sense of magic and not creating a new dogmatized people that just they are not able to understand the science, so they are opening themselves up to misinformation and dogma.
I am muted myself. Well, that's a question which, for me at least, is above my pay grade. As you know, what I do is build instruments and spacecraft that go and encounter other planets and make in situ measurements and so on. So, in my field, artificial intelligence means that we can build a more robust instrument and a more robust spacecraft that we need the minimum amount of interaction from the ground to do its job. And a lot of things are moving in that direction. To give you an example, I have an instrument on the Voyager 1 and 2 spacecraft, which was designed in the mid-70s, and that spacecraft is still working, and it's out in the galaxy. And the memory on the spacecraft is about 60K, believe it or not. But despite that, we're able to communicate, and it needs a lot of intervention from the ground. The more current spacecraft that we design and build in the space program have lots of computing capability. And what we find is that it's exceptionally difficult to test all the modes in which the system can operate. And that's where artificial intelligence is absolutely essential to the extent that it can really make a very autonomous system. And we don't have that. So no ethical issues, but we have usage issues, which we like to take advantage of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Goffey, are you able to hear us and give us your thoughts? I will apologize to Dr. Goffey. There seems to be a problem with the connection, so I would like to go on with the discussion. Professor Joseph Sifakis, you talked a lot about self-certification and the risk that might impose. Can you guide us a little bit through, if we are talking about biosciences and if we're talking about discoveries of new drugs, AI and softwares as a medical device are things that the FDA is considering. And they published a white paper last year where there was a discussion on how a software can be a medical device. Could you give us some thoughts on the danger that might entail for the public?
Yes, thank you. This is a very good question. In fact, as I explained, when some processes, I mean some artifacts can be critical in their use, we apply standards and independent authorities like FAA, for instance, for the United States for aircraft, or FDA. FDA has abandoned the idea to apply strict standards to medical devices and to anything medical, and they allow self-certification. Self-certification means that the manufacturer of the artifact, can be a vaccine, can be a device, will guarantee that it's not dangerous. And this is against the standard practice for critical systems for the moment. We will see how the situation will evolve, but they want to leave the game open, not only FDA, but also FAA, okay, and other agencies in the United States. This is not the case, of course, in Europe, where they apply the precautionary principle, as I explained.
What is your position, Professor Daskalakis? You also talked about AI failures and AI mistakes. So if we allow a software to make a diagnosis, would there be problems? How often can we expect these problems? And thinking about in the past where we promised some new discoveries, we had the watch on oncology, and in some cases other machines that fail to promise what they deliver. How does that work with the public trust?
It's a very complex issue, and it ultimately boils down to the fact that these algorithms are statistical algorithms. So they are trained on some data set, and you can certainly certify that their accuracy is good with respect to the population from which the data that are trained on is coming from. The issue is that whether or not you can trust that the data set that your algorithm was trained on is a representative data set for the conditions that your system will encounter in the future. So just to compare with what we do in what you do in the life sciences. So when you want to test a drug, you want to do a randomized control trial on some population of humans. So you pay a lot of attention on collecting a representative sample for the target population. And you know, if you convince authorities that you did a good job in collecting the a representative sample from the population of interest, then you can test your efficacy on that sample and claim using statistical methodology that the same type of accuracy will extend to the full population. Of course, there can be mistakes. Maybe you may maybe even your data collection experiment failed to account for certain variables that are important, and in that case, also the drug's accuracy will not be consistent when you deploy it. So AI technology has the similar issues, except because these algorithms are so complex, so you have two issues. So one issue is that it's very hard to find a representative sample. At the same time, your algorithm is so complex that from a mathematical standpoint, it's very hard to understand it, except from saying that it does really well on the data set you got. So if the data set fails to be representative, all bets are off. This is the heart of the problem. So, right, so it's a combination of, a combination of the fact that the algorithms are very complex, and that finding representative data sets is really hard.
Thank you. Okay, let me go back to a general question for everyone in this panel. So in this new era, how do we see ourselves as scientists, coming from a common background, having an ethnic identity, following the same philosophical issues that we might have learned from our earlier life back in Greece? Is there any need of a new Greek paradigm? Can we steer a scientific community by aligning into a new society? What are your views on that? I would like to start from Professor Sifakis, please.
Yes, that's a very good question. I think that we need a deep reform of organization of reform of research in Greece. And if we want to talk about a Greek paradigm, the question is how we make the connection between Greek diaspora and scientists in Greece. That's a very important question, and I think that we should work toward creating some synergy there. Of course, there are many obstacles, and when I was the chairman of the National Board for Research and Technology, I had made proposals that we have a specific status of visiting professors for Greek scientists of the diaspora, and it did not work. I think everybody was against this idea. And I think we should open Greek universities and Greek research organizations to the diaspora. That's very important. And being inspired, of course, by examples of obvious examples of other countries. Israel is a very interesting example, of course. But what I'm saying is trivial, and I think we should have worked in that direction now since many years. This did not happen, unfortunately.
Maybe Professor Krimigis, can you give us your thoughts? You are muted, if you can unmute yourself.
I had similar experiences with Professor Sifakis. He was my successor on a set. You know, there is this very interesting statistical study that shows that 3% of the most cited scientists worldwide are Greeks or of Greek origin, even though our percentage of the world population is like, I think, 0.2%. So we are overrepresented in scholarship and discoveries and publications. Except when you start looking at the fine print, you find out that 85% of those 3% highly cited scientists are abroad, outside Greece, not in Greece. And many of the remaining 15% who are in Greece came from abroad back to Greece. So we have a huge problem with our educational system. And whether we can talk about the Greek paradigm, I'm not sure, because we Greek scientists seem to thrive outside of Greece. How are we, which means that we participate in systems that are superior to those in Greece. So I'm very pessimistic that we'll ever develop a Greek paradigm.
Can I have your views, Professor Daskalakis?
Yeah, so first, general comment. I think that relating to Greek history and I think we are in need for a different paradigm here, because as AI is moving on to influence other disciplines, we definitely need a more holistic perspective. So I think we should all have several viewpoints to be influential in research. Regarding educational system in Greece, I'm very sorry to hear about the experiences of Professor Krimigis and Sifakis. I do agree that we have excellent scientists abroad, and Greece should certainly exploit that huge human capital to influence education in Greece. I would like to stay optimistic, but I think in the end of the day, it's a matter of political will. And I hope that maybe if not this generation, future generations will change that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I would like to thank all of our speakers very much. There have been a few technical difficulties. It has been a shame that we were not able to listen to Dr. Goffey's presentation and his views. Thank you very much again for your interesting presentations and the nice discussion. I think I would like to close the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.